Here is the planet's ultimate game, the final of the 21st Football World Cup. Flicked in by Griezmann and flicked on! And France take the lead in the World Cup final!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Arab News World Cup podcast, where we talk about the latest from Qatar 22, and what a 22 it's been. Absolutely incredible tournament, packed with so much brilliant goals, excitement, but the fans have made it for me. 17 days, 56 matches have flown by, and we're at that quarter-final stage now, where only 8 matches remain. Alongside me, as always, is Arab News sport editor Ali Khaled. AK, now the group stages and round 16 are just at a close. How's it been for you as a whole, as a tournament?
I think it's been brilliant, Pete. First of all, good to be back. You know, we took
great to be back.
We our last pod was just before the start of the tournament, and we wanted to concentrate on the group matches and the round of 16, and then wrap it up. And there's so much to wrap up. It's been brilliant. I think the football has been excellent. There's been really exciting stuff for people, fans from the region, fans of the Arab teams. In the end, obviously only one of them qualified, but all of them sort of went into the last match day with hopes high, so that, or with at least with hopes of progress, which hasn't happened a lot. There's been a lot of shocks. There's been some great games as well. And overall, I think it's really delivered. It's looked fantastic on TV. Yeah, the stadiums have looked great. We've spoken to many people who have been at the matches, reporters, correspondents, people working in TV, and fans, and everyone said the match day experience has been great. And in general, they've had a really fantastic time. And fans have come from all over the world and seem to be really enjoying it.
I've got to say that because obviously it has had its murmurs about the World Cup beforehand, as any venue does. Let's have it right. But once you said something that I picked up on. Once the football starts, and it did, everyone's forgotten all about that. And everyone I've spoken to, by the way, fans, media people alike, they've had an absolute ball in Doha. It's been fantastic. The crowds have been brilliant. The noise, the atmosphere. Yeah. I know from Laura Woods on TV, who sometimes can't hear herself think in the heat of the action. So brilliant stuff all round. The only sad thing for me is that it has to come to an end soon with the world champions, whoever they might be. Let's start with that then. Let's start with Morocco. A sensational win over Spain on penalties. Ali, put it into context for us, would you? What it means to Morocco and the Arab world to have such a stunning result.
I think, Pete, it's really hard to put it in context, other than to say it is the greatest result in Morocco's history, really. I mean, in World Cup terms, they played. They were the first, one of the first teams, I should say, after Egypt. They played in 1970. They played in 1986, and that was the first time they qualified to the second round, the first and only time they qualified to the second round. They played Germany, West Germany at the time, in the round of 16, and lost very late on to a Lothar Matthäus goal. There was a lot of heartbreak, but they had qualified through a group that had England and Poland as well, and Portugal. Like a really tough group. So they have that heritage from 1986, and everybody loves that 1986 team. That was their greatest ever achievement, and this surpasses it. This was absolutely sensational. They were organized. They played with courage. Beyond heroic, really. They were just absolutely brilliant. And you expect Spain to have the majority of the possession against Morocco, as you would expect Spain to have majority possession against anyone, really. So, but they still cost Spain a couple of scares. In normal time.
I thought
and
they were a better team in the first half, Ali, I have to say.
And when they were quite threatening when they did go forward, obviously they had to bide their time, and you have to do that against Spain, who are just going to starve you of possession. But they did have a couple of chances in extra time as well. Could have even could have won it in extra time. Incredibly, course, Spain had that last minute chance when they hit the post. But like the penalty shootout came, and how cool were those penalties? Especially the last one from Ashraf Hakimi. I mean, he's been an absolute star for Morocco throughout the tournament. I mean, let's not forget, but they beat Belgium 2-0. They beat Canada 2-1. They drew 0-0 with Croatia. It's got 7 points from their group, which no one else has bettered in this tournament. And after the result against Spain, this is the best campaign by an Arab nation at the World Cup ever. So and you know what? You were putting it in context for what it means to Morocco, but you've seen, I think, over on social media, on the news in the last couple of days, just what it means to Arab fans, in general. Everybody's like sort of rallied behind Morocco. They're the last remaining Arab team, and everybody's behind them as well. So it means it means the world to Morocco, but for the rest of the Arab region as well.
I like that, Ali. I like the fact that the other nations get behind a fellow nation, a bit like Wales getting behind England, I would imagine, for the next round. Okay, moving swiftly on. I've got to talk about Saudi Arabia. A sensational 2-1 win over Argentina in their first match. What are the biggest shocks of this, or any World Cup for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, look, we knew Saudi were well prepared. We knew they had a good team. And if you remember, before the start of the tournament, you and I were chatting, and we still thought, the Argentina game might just be a little bit too much for them. And we were looking at the second match against Poland and thinking that's where they might have a really good chance. And of course, they go and beat Argentina, an absolutely sensational match, an incredible match. And, the expectations just skyrocketed after that in Saudi Arabia, everywhere. I think a lot of people, we know that how football works. It's not always, linear. If you beat Argentina, then who are better than Poland, then surely you can beat Poland. That we know it doesn't work like that, of course. And I think maybe Argentina weren't expecting what was about to hit them, from Saudi Arabia. Surely they would have seen them in their friendlies, of course, and they would have followed their progress. But they didn't know how Saudi Arabia are going to set up, at the World Cup, And Saudi Arabia were absolutely
physical is the word.
Yeah, and very fit. They played a very high line. Remember that first half when they were 1-0 down, conceded a few more goals that were disallowed, and everyone would say, why are they playing such a high line? But then the second half came, and they went out and they hit Argentina with those 2 quick goals. Brilliant goals, both of them. And so I think the expectations after that rose so much that people were somehow, going into against Poland, people were expecting them to win, which is still a big ask. I think Poland obviously had seen that. Poland were not going to fall for, like a big surprise. They were quite physical, quite intimidating, or tried to intimidate, I think, the Saudi players with their physicality. They sat back. Saudi Arabia were very much on the front foot in that first half. I thought Saudi Arabia played as well against Poland as they did against Argentina.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, they didn't get the breaks. They were 1-0 down, and then they had that penalty just before halftime. It was saved by Chesney, and then, of course, Lewandowski scored late on. They played well in that game, and unfortunately, they just fell short. They didn't get the breaks, and the last match, I thought, against Mexico, they looked a bit tired, I have to say. But there were also like circumstances for that, Pete. They 2 of their best players were injured.
Yeah.
A couple others were suspended. One of them had to go off, So, and again, Mexico are a very good team. They hadn't performed before that point, but Mexico needed to win, and they needed to win by a lot of goals. They were never going to ease off. So even when they got the 2 goals, it's not like Mexico got 2 goals and said, right, we'll ease off, and this gives Saudi Arabia a chance to go. Mexico were just, on the front foot throughout the match because they knew they needed as many goals as possible. And of course, they got eliminated, from that match, So
incredible
because they won 2-1, but they needed to win 3-0. So eventually, you have to look back and say Saudi Arabia were in a very, very tough group. They'll always have that win against Argentina, which is, again, one of the greatest, if not their greatest result of all time, in the same way that Morocco's against Spain is their greatest of all time as well.
The DVD will be out next week. The greatest performance in World Cup for me. Listen, I've got to ask you, given that Saudi Arabia, their fans and everything brought such colourful, amazing scenes to the World Cup, but also the social media where they've been trending for weeks. They've blown TikTok up with their brilliant nature. They've really, really embraced it. I've got to ask you though, and it's my media head on, having beaten Argentina, do you think that the rest of the tournament represent a bit of a disappointment or an anticlimax indeed for those fans?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's human nature. There's expectation, just like, as we say, like, became so high after that first match that you started to think, well, just one more point from those two matches could be enough. Just one, just a draw, might be enough for Saudi Arabia to get to the round of 16. So to lose the two games, yes, it was disappointing. I think putting in context, and maybe in the weeks to come, we can look back and say it was really, really, a tough group. And like I said, the only time I thought they might have slightly underperformed, but again, because of the injuries and tiredness, was in the last match. That was the only match I thought where they looked a little bit tired. They looked a little bit outplayed. And, you just have to say, look, Mexico were the better team on the day. But in the other two matches, they were absolutely fantastic against Argentina. I thought they played really well against Poland as well, but didn't get the breaks. So overall, you really can't ask much more of the players. I think a few of the players really performed at a high level. Salem Adosari scored twice, a great goal against Argentina, and in the last game against Mexico, he's the star man. The goalkeeper Alawais was fantastic as well across the three matches. Really, whenever they needed to defend, in those last minutes of matches, he was, he stood tall. Mohamed Kanu, who is and in midfield, a lot of people, pointed him out as one of the star men for Saudi Arabia, saying this guy looks like he could play at a very high level in Europe. So those three players stood out for me. I think
that was mentioned in the Northeast. Box to box.
Yeah, absolutely, man. A box-to-box player, and really stood out. I think it's natural that we were all disappointed, but I think certain people at the end of the tournament were saying, well, if Salem Dosari's missed penalty, and if only the coach Hervé Renard had done this, and if he'd only done that and all that, and I think it's easy to say all of these things in hindsight. I thought they gave absolutely everything, and there will be no regrets from the Saudis at all, which you can't say for some of the other teams.
Hindsight makes a wonderful football report. There you go.
Yep.
Listen, before we get back to talking about how the Arab teams fared as a whole, I want to talk about some of the highlights of Qatar 22 for you, the standout players and matches so far, because it has been a fantastic tournament.
Yeah, I think that as we expected, Brazil have been excellent. They've been really, really well. I think in the group stage, sort of they would start off a little bit slow and then really take over in the second half of matches. But in the game against South Korea in the round of 16, they just were absolutely sensational. Probably the best half of football at that time. Those 4 goals in the first half.
Have they arrived as a Brazilian great team?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that, maybe this is, their signature performance so far. Obviously this is a very good team who's ranked number 1 in the world, and they did play very well in the group stages. But that performance, I think, was signature performance, and they were sensational. I think Neymar's been. He's been injured. He for 2 matches, came back for this. He played relatively well. I think Richarlison has been the star man. He's been, he scored 2 of the best goals in the tournament so far. Vinicius Junior has looked good as well. I think in general, they've looked at even in defense, Thiago Silva's looked solid with Marquinhos. Alisson's been great when called upon, not often, but when teams do get through, Alisson has been quite solid. Rafinha's looked good as well, but Richarlison has been the star man, and that win over South Korea was the standout for Brazil. France as well, obviously, have been very good as we expected, and Mbappe really has stood out. He looks explosive. He's got his 5 goals, and probably will end up being the top scorer of the tournament, as it looks like at the moment, depending on how that game against England goes. But he's massively stood out. Giroud broke a world record as well. French record. He broke Thierry Henry's French, which is
Henry, didn't he?
Surpassed Thierry Henry, which is a fantastic achievement. So France have really looked good. I think England have looked pretty solid as well. And they've had a couple of stand-up. So I think Foden, once he came in, has looked very good. Phil Foden, Saka, as usual, again, very, very promising. Those are the teams that have looked really good. I think in the round of 16, Portugal really surprised me with that win over Switzerland. They hadn't been great in the group stages, and then they put on the performance of the tournament, that 6-1. And they had dropped Ronaldo for that match. All the talk was about Ronaldo drop, but his replacement, Gonzalo Ramos, 21-year-old, comes in and scores a hat-trick. And they looked absolutely brilliant. And of course, they play Morocco next, so see how that goes. But yeah, those have been some of the highlights and some of the players for me.
Absolutely fantastic. Got to say, quick note.
Go on. Sorry. And in general, also, I think it's just been great to have like a lot of matches that have produced surprises and shocks. I know that it's been spoken about a lot. So obviously, we've already mentioned Saudi Arabia, but Japan beat Germany and Spain. Which is incredible, really. And then could have beaten Croatia, went to penalties and lost, and of course South Korea beat Portugal as well 2-1. There's been a lot of surprise results, and usually a good World Cup will give you like maybe 1 or 2 shocks and all that. And we've already had like about 4 or 5 or 6 really surprising results.
Just going back to the penalties, the Spanish coach, national coach, what a player he was as well, by the way, hoped that the players had taken 1,000 penalties before the World Cup. You may have to look at that one again. They may have to take 2,000 penalties before the next tournament. Listen, players, teams there that you've mentioned, fantastic. Any major highlights as a tournament for you?
Yeah, I think what has really stood out for me, and again, from speaking to people, from watching the games, for following social media, from watching the news, it's the fans. I think the fans really, really have stood out in this tournament, especially the Arab fans. Obviously we're stating the obvious. It's the first time the tournament has been held in an Arab country in the Middle East. But like the Arab fans or fans of the Arab nations, whether the four nations who are taking part or just, sort of the wider Arab region, they really have stepped up. And it was fantastic to watch, like Saudi Arabia in that game against Argentina, when the goal went in and the stadium erupted. And I was thinking, this has never happened before. Arab nations have never played in the World Cup where the stadium, has been, they have the support of the whole stadium. Of course, again, to repeat the obvious is that it's the first time it's been held in an Arab nation. But, they, like in the past, whether you've played in the US or in somewhere in South America or in Europe, the stadiums are made up of a mixture of fans, or mostly Europeans or mostly South Americans. You've never had a stadium at the World Cup which is, full of Arab fans, and it was fantastic to see that. Saudi Arabia score and the whole stadium just erupts. Morocco in their matches, just absolutely sensational supporters, probably some of the best supporters in the world. Tunisia, the same, and of course Qatar, the home nation, they disappointed, but their fans showed up again, so it was fantastic to see, just the support that the Arab nations have had, and that stood out for me. And also, you have to make a point for all the fans of all the other nations as well. They have been brilliant, like you watch the Argentina fans, incredible. Brazil, incredible. England, you've seen all these videos of people really enjoying themselves, and people, with certain England supporters sometimes can be stereotypical and say, oh, they're troublemakers and all that. There's been none of that. Everyone's just gone and had an amazing time.
Absolute A+ gold stars all around for organisation. It's been brilliant. And probably the only disappointment for the hosts would be their on the pitch exploits. A step too far for Qatar. Really, they looked like what they provided. Plenty of effort, but just not at the races, really, were they?
No, they weren't. They weren't. Massive disappointment, Pete. Absolutely massive, massive disappointment. We really looked at that opening day fixture against Ecuador and we thought, if
Didn't it?
go out and play the game of your lives. This is it. You've waited 12 years for this. This is the moment of your lives, and they massively disappointed. They looked. They looked panicky. They looked a little bit scared, which is strange. Playing at home. But I mean, understandable that they'll be a little bit tense. But it wasn't just like that. They looked a little bit worried. The tactics themselves were negative.
They had no shape, Ali.
They had no shape. They kept trying to keep the ball at the back and knock it about, without really showing any aggression going forward. I spoke a lot around the time the difference between them and Saudi Arabia in that opening match, and I was talking about bravery. We're talking about courage, and not just. I mean, it's not the courage to just throw yourself into tackles. It's not the courage to put your body on the line, which Saudi Arabia did, by the way. But it's more the tactical courage, to go forward, to like attack. And Qatar didn't show that, And once they lost that first match 2-0, and they conceded early in the first half as well. So you've waited 12 years, and within the first 20 minutes, you're 2-0 down, already on the back foot. They never recovered from that. And the negativity just went into the next match and the next match.
You could see it from the first 20 minutes, AK. What happened was that goal went in. They were all looking at each other. They were looking at the bench. There was no formation. There was no plan B. There was no backup. And unfortunately, as brutal as it is, their World Cup was over in that first 20 minutes.
It was. It really was. I mean, as you say, like hindsight sometimes is, 2020. But like you look at that first half, and after that, even then you thought, this team will really struggle in this tournament if they continue playing like that. And sadly, they continued to play like that, And in the end, Pete, what we thought was going to be an advantage to them turned out to be a massive disadvantage. So we know that the players were taken out of club football, as early as June. They've been, camped, doing one training camp after another. They played a few friendlies and all that. But it turns out, being away from competitive football did affect them. They looked short on. They were all second best to the ball. They looked short on fitness, and again, maybe not, actual physical fitness, but more like match fitness. They looked like a team that hadn't played for a long time, certainly at that level. So we thought they were given the best possible preparation of all time, and well, turns out it was counterproductive.
I had a team that, cast your mind back to 1986. There was a team that football fans, purists fell in love with in and around that era, which was Denmark.
Yeah.
Now, I have a team that matched that this World Cup, who I fell in love with, and that team was Tunisia. I thought they were absolutely outstanding. I loved the way they played, loved what they stood for, stylish, went about their business. How on earth did they depart that tournament? I mean, utterly heartbreaking.
It is. I mean, I think that for me is one of the massive disappointments when we're talking about the Arab nations. Not because they disappointed only in one match. I wouldn't even say let themselves down. Just that the game went against them. So that they start off against Denmark, who were quite fancied at the beginning of the tournament. Don't forget they're like Euro semi-finalists as well, and everyone expected Denmark to win that match. And Tunisia got a draw out of it. It's a great start to get a draw. Their next game was against Australia, and with all due respect to Australia, that was the match that Tunisia really should have gone for. Had they got the 3 points there, really close to like progressing to the knockout stages. But then they go and lose 1-0 to Australia in that second match. And they go into the last match against France, the world champions France. Sure, they had already qualified and made a lot of changes, but it was still a very strong team. And Tunisia need a win, and they go and get that win, And incredibly, it just turns out it wasn't enough, because again, Australia beat Denmark. They needed Denmark and Australia to draw, so things went against them. But they will regret that 1-0 defeat to Australia, because to get a point out of Denmark, to beat the world champions France, the two more difficult games in the group, and then fair play to Australia, who had a great campaign, I thought, and played very well against Argentina. But for Tunisia, that would have been the match they thought they'd get at least a point out of, and they got nothing.
Unfortunate. Loved the attitude of them as well. Great stuff, Ali. Listen, as always, I love to do this, but I'm going to put you on the spot. course, we love a prediction here. So going to get your predictions for the quarterfinals. First up, Netherlands, Argentina.
I'm going to go the Netherlands 1, Argentina 2.
Okay. Spoke with many of our friends and guests from sister podcasts, Ali. They fancy the Netherlands. The Netherlands, they've got something in this World Cup. I think that it's a major possibility. I'm with you on this, though. I do fancy Argentina. Croatia, Brazil.
Yep. Croatia, Brazil. It's got to be Brazil, really. I mean, Croatia have not been that impressive. I mean, I know obviously they've got good pedigree in the last few years. They got to the final last time, but you know they've played good in certain patches, you know. But Brazil have been excellent, especially after the last performance. I would expect Brazil to win, you know, comfortably, shall we say? I would, you know, maybe possibly Croatia 1, Brazil 3.
Comfortably was a word I was going to use. Croatia, for me, I just want to shake them, wake them up a little bit, just to get that last, you know what they can do. I mean, they've been outstanding with Perisic and Modric quiet last time out. So yeah, I think Brazil quite comfortably on that one. England, France, massive.
Oof. Yeah, massive. Probably, I mean, I would think the tightest of the quarterfinals. In terms of, like, you know, who would you think has the edge? I'm going to go for a France win. Again, I would think England 1, France 2. I just think that they've got a lot of cutting edge up front, which England do as well. You know, England have really good attackers. But I think, you know, if you're looking for a trump card, it's going to be Mbappe. He's been absolutely brilliant. And I think could be one of those where, you know, a player, you know, grabs hold of a match, grabs hold of a World Cup, and, you know, makes it his own. Don't forget, he's already done that 4 years ago. He's already a world champion, and he was already like France's best player at the last World Cup. So, yeah, I'm going to go for Mbappe to star and France to beat England 2-1.
Okay, we differ here because one player doesn't make a World Cup team for me. Now, a couple of points. Gareth, if you're listening, the tactician in me. And this is not because he plays at Newcastle United. So hear me out on this thought process, Ali. All the talk has been who will mark Mbappe. And of course, all the talk has been match him for pace, Kyle Walker. For me, bring in Kieran Trippier, who isn't slow, by the way, but also has played on the continent. He has positioning skills. He knows how to shoulder. He knows how to turn. But more importantly, I think one England player who could play if Trippier plays, it would be a definite starter, is Saka. And that is because of his partnership. He gets more from Trippier. He gets fed more from Trippier down the line than he does from Walker. And that was evident in the games that Walker's played. That Saka, although on the score sheet, he didn't receive a lot of the ball. For me, if they play that and they do that, England win.
Very good. I mean, I see what you're saying. I was wondering, like, if you are going to do something like that, Pete, or do you think that Gareth Southgate might be tempted for this game to maybe change his tactics, maybe play tactics that he's played so far in the World Cup, shall we say, maybe even play 5 at the back just to counter that attack? I mean, it's not always a good idea to change tactics in the middle of a tournament, but, you know, it's happened in the past.
He would.
We know Bobby Robson changed, to a back 5 famously in 1990, and England went on. But that was because the group stage hadn't been going well. You know, these are different circumstances, but, you know, possibly 3 in the middle and someone to mark Mbappe. I'm not sure if this would be a wise move at this stage, or if it's something that Gareth Southgate has looked at and planned for. Who knows? But interesting about Trippier, you know, because as you're right, everyone's been saying that play Walker. He's the quickest player that England have in that right back position.
I watched Alan Saint-Maximin, another Frenchman, absolutely destroy Kyle
I remember
Walker.
that. Yep.
So just a word to the wise on that. Speed isn't everything. I think a brain and a tactical brain could be good. Okay, so last up, and again, we might differ on this one. I have a feeling. Morocco, Portugal.
Well, I mean, never has there been as much of like my head says something and my heart says the other. I really want Morocco to win for many reasons. Obviously, it's a team that I really like, and for us as supporters of Arab football, I would love for Morocco to win, but I have to say, and you know what? Until that Portugal game against Switzerland, I was thinking, this could be even. I think you have to make Portugal favorites for this. It will be, yeah. I think Portugal are favorites, and if Portugal play like they did against Switzerland, then I'll see. I think it's going to be really tough for Morocco sort of to repeat what they did against Spain. But they've been superbly organized and just played with such spirit, such organization, and like real bravery, as we mentioned, both bravery in throwing their bodies on the line and bravery in going for it and seizing the day, which is what we want the players to be. We don't want them to be cautious. So while my heart really wants Morocco, if I'm going to have to go purely on of what Portugal did against Switzerland, I'll probably say Morocco 0, Portugal 2.
Okay, I'm going to take Morocco. I'm living in the magic of the cup, and I think that they will be your semi-finalists. 1-0 narrow win for me. Morocco do it.
I really hope so. And I hope I've jinxed Portugal by saying that. I've never wanted like a team to win a match as much as rarely have I wanted a team to win a match as much as I want Morocco to win that one. But we'll wait and see. It's going to be tough.
As always, I'm more romantic than Ali. He's a pragmatist. I'm a romantic. Okay, listen, it's been brilliant to see you, Ali. Look forward to the next one where we can catch up and again piece together what's been an absolutely superb World Cup here with Arab news. Come on, Morocco.